I want to talk about RabbitMQ header exchanges and how they can be used to bring analytics into your application in a unique way by using arguments from your headers that you can set on a RabbitMQ message that can then be used to route your message to a respective queue. So if you have seen videos previously on my channel, we've built a lot of things in RabbitMQ and our engines application. One thing we've built so far is this. We have a fan out exchange routing messages down to our logging queue. And if you've seen in previous videos, that is then reflected on the front end with SignalR and WebSockets. So what I'm going to show you is how to add an additional exchange of type of a header exchange type that then routes messages to either a postman.analytics queue or a default.analytics queue based on a custom header that we're going to set in the code. So you can actually route messages from one exchange down to another exchange. It gets pretty complicated pretty fast if you don't keep track of it, but you can have an exchange route to an exchange, which is just wild. I mean, it's super powerful, but you can see how that can get complicated pretty quick. So by default, RabbitMQ has your exchanges not bound to anything, right? So you can bind your exchanges to a queue, or you can bind an exchange to another exchange. So we have made a header exchange. So I'm going to show you the code for this here and why I think that this is very powerful. So before, you can see I have my application is running. So if we look at what's commented here, I just have a kind of a mocked endpoint here that allows me to send a message, a log message, and all the log is where is it? Do I have it defined somewhere here? Hopefully, hold on. Let me go to definition. So the log is just a message and a source. And so if we go back here, before I made these changes, what's commented here is what a typical publish will look like using MassTransit to RabbitMQ. So all I'm doing is passing in the object type and the object itself, the log. And that's going to get routed or published to my logging exchange, which is right here. So you can see the bindings. I have it bound to a logging queue and also a logging.analytics exchange. But if you go back to, you can see that this is a, trying to think, here it is. This is a fan out queue. So a fan out queue is going to, by default, route to everything that's bound to it, regardless of arguments or routing keys. So if I publish a log to here, it's going to get routed to the logging queue and also the logging.analytics exchange. So let's go to the queues, and I'm going to show you the message that comes through from when we send it. So I'm going to go ahead and open Postman here. I'm just going to send a message, and you'll see it come through this log into this logging queue here. See that message change from 9 to 10. And so you can see that it routes again through the logging exchange. It's bound to that queue, so it gets routed to this queue. So what I want to show you in the code is a way to modify how that message gets routed throughout your system inside RabbitMQ using custom headers. So a header exchange looks for headers that are set on the message frame that gets sent or published to RabbitMQ. So right here, I'm going to set a custom header called source. You can call it whatever you want because you can define custom headers. Where it gets confusing is the context, or is in the message properties, which is different or distinct from headers in RabbitMQ, or really the AMQP message frame as part of the AMQ protocol. But here we're just setting custom headers. So I actually do a little bit of code here to say that if my log contains a property that's equal to Postman. So if the source property is Postman, I'm going to set this custom header to be rabbit.postman. And you can call that whatever you want, but there's some kind of naming terminology in RabbitMQ. If you've used topic exchanges before, typically you'll do like a dot something. It just is a way to distinguish, like if you're going to route on a topic, like, you know, rabbit maybe dot analytics dot logging. Then you can use wildcards and stuff. So that's just where this comes from. It doesn't actually have any meaning by doing dot anything. It's just what I've decided to use here. So you can see that I make that determination in code. So if it's equal to Postman, I'm going to set that custom header, and then I'm going to set it on the message, and then I'm going to publish that with that header. So let's go ahead and look at that message that we sent. I might have to purge the queue. Hold on, let me go to that logging queue. I'm going to purge the messages from the queue. I'm going to resend a message, or I'm going to republish a message to the exchange, and let's see it come through into this queue. Give it a second. It takes like 5 seconds to refresh, and you can see that message there. I'm going to get the message, and you'll see where we have sent that custom header. So you see the source header and rabbit.postman. So this again is just in the logging queue that is just receiving every message from the logging exchange. What I want to show you is how we can take advantage of that custom header being set. So if we go to our logging queue, our logging exchange again, you can see that I've bound this logging underscore analytics. If we go to that, it's actually another exchange that I've defined. But the difference is I've defined it as a type of headers. And all that means it's going to look for these arguments here. So this argument section here is only used, to my knowledge, for this headers exchange type. So you can see that I've bound it to two things. I've bound it to default.analyticsQ and a postman.analyticsQ. And if we look at the arguments, you're going to see the source colon rabbit.postman. And what that's saying is that if it gets a message with a header of source that is set to rabbit.postman, it's going to route that message to whatever queue that I've bound to there. So to set this up, I literally just went down here in the exchange, so logging analytics, header exchange, and I just typed in, 2q postman.analytics with an argument, again, of source. And the source comes from, again, that part in code where I set the custom header. So it can be called whatever you want. So whatever you called the header is going to be the first argument here. And then the equal to is going to be the value. So here I just have it set to rabbit.postman. So I would just set that equal to here. And you can do string, number, boolean. You can get very complicated very quick. And then I just hit bind. And then that's where you see it pop up here. I'm not going to do it again because I've already bound it. So let's go ahead and see this in action because I think this is very cool and it's very powerful. So let's go to the postman.analytics. I'm going to purge this queue so we know that nothing is in there. Let's refresh. We're down to 0. And then let's go ahead and send a message or publish a message again to our first exchange. So we have the source is set to postman. So we should expect the message to end up in this queue. So let's go ahead and publish that message. And let's refresh this. So we now see a number 1 here for ready, which is good, which means that the message got here. So let's go ahead and get that message and check that it is there. So you can see this is our message, test postman, and then rabbit.postman is the source. But let's go ahead and check something because, again, if we go back to the exchange that we have set up, the header exchange, you can see that it's bound to 2 queues, the default.analytics and postman.analytics. But the difference is the default.analytics is only bound to, only has an argument that is looking for the source is equal to rabbit.default. So we should expect if we go to this queue, we don't have any messages because the message did not get routed here because it had a different source, it had different argument. The source didn't match the argument. So, but if I go ahead and change this to what the argument is looking for, so where did I have that set? What's the source? Rabbit.default. Let's go make that the source, rabbit.default. Whoops. Okay, and then let's send that through. So what we should expect to see is, let's go ahead and go to Postman. Where are we at? Default to analytics. There it is. Let's go ahead and send this message through, and it should get routed to this queue now. And there it is. So let's go ahead and get the message, and you can see that that's the source. So it's very, very powerful. And the reason why this is so powerful, and the reason why I have it set up with the first, the reason why I have it set up like this with the fan out exchange routing down to your logging queue and then having another exchange where the message gets routed to as well is because you can basically add, I'll show you. Let's say you have like some web app here. I don't know, let's make that green and we'll say we have, a web app consumer, right? And you have that web app consumer, listening to the logging queue and doing something with it. This here should be, in my opinion, an entirely independent flow from whatever's happening, over here in this exchange, right? If all we're concerned about really, to the core operation of our system is that the message itself is being routed through the exchange to the queue and then being consumed by the web app, that's all the flow should be concerned about. And if we're having to make any kind of determination based on where the routing is happening, and it's not integral to the core function of our system, particularly in this case where we're just using it for analytics, so we can just have some kind of like logging service or web app consuming off these different queues, that if that gets backed up, we shouldn't be just, it should be independent of this. And I think that's why I like having the exchange route to this exchange, because we don't need any of the additional overhead of the header exchange. We can just use the fan out exchange and it can be very fast, and this whole flow is not affected by any kind of latency that might be introduced by introducing argument matching on the header exchange. You'd have to do a performance benchmark, and I want to do that at some point. I just have to set all this stuff up. But every time you introduce more complex routing keys or argument matching, it's going to introduce just a little bit of latency. So over time, you don't want that to affect, the speed of your core system, which is why I wanted to separate it out, because this now is its own flow. So it's not affected by however intricate we get with this argument matching here. So that's really why I did that. And the code to do that is very simple. So if you have some serious analytics you're trying to do, setting custom headers and setting that in the code before you publish might be a reasonable option for you if it doesn't bog down your system too much to introduce that the logic to set those headers. If you're just checking a string, beforehand, like me, this is a really basic example, but it illustrates the point. I would explore this, do some performance benchmarking, but you can see how it just works, and it works very well. And RabbitMQ is set up to handle this very nicely. And again, if you're using MassTransit, you can set custom headers just like that. So I happen to be using just a bus, and I'm using a publish, but you can access them on the context, which is nice. So that's the syntax. So you can, I found that on a thread. I'm sure that's somewhere in the documentation. But if we actually just want to set this up ourselves, because you saw me set up the queue, all you have to do is, if you want to make a new header exchange, you come down to add a new exchange, you give it a name, so we'll say, logging analytics, and we'll say 2 because we already done another one. you give it a type of headers, so you can see that we have, it's direct, fan out, headers, and topic. I want to do headers because that's the only one that matches on headers. Durability is set to durable. Basically, if our RabbitMQ server for whatever reason crashes, we want these to we want all our stuff to persist. So that's why we leave it as durable. Auto delete, no, we don't want to. I think, is auto delete, okay, it tells you. If yes, the exchange will delete itself after at least one queue or exchange has been bound to this one. And then all queues or exchanges have been unbound. Okay, yeah. And I don't set any arguments for here just because this is going to be like kind of our entry point to then perform the routing. So I would just go ahead and hit add exchange to this. So let's go ahead and do that, I guess. I guess we can just set this up so it's in the video. So now we have an exchange of logging analytics 2. You can see it's not bound to anything. So if I want to create the binding for what I showed you earlier, you can come down here, add binding from this exchange. You can say, I have to look up what the queue names are again. We can bind to the postman.analytics. And RabbitMQ will check that these are right, so you don't have to really worry about it. But again, this is where we set the source, the arguments. So we have source, and then is equal to, what do we say, rabbit.postman? Yeah. And that's it. And then you bind it, and you do that for the other one. So I think it was default.analytics, pretty sure. And source. And what is the rabbit.default? Okay. These namings are not very good. I could probably make these better. So we go ahead and hit bind. It should be, is that right? Yeah, that should be right. So now we've created that exchange bound to those two queues. Now the next thing we have to do is actually bind this exchange to the other exchange. So we've called that logging analytics 2. So our main fan out exchange is logging. So all we have to do is add binding from this exchange. We change that to exchange, and then we call it, whatever we just named it. So logging analytics 2, and we bind it. So now we've created the whole thing. Everything I showed you, we just made. So I guess we can go ahead and test it again just to make sure that we didn't miss anything. Let's go ahead and send a message through. Let's go down to the default analytics. Yeah, so now it has two messages. Actually, let me make sure that is, I should have, let's see, it should be receiving messages. I guess probably I'd have to unbind the other one. But you kind of get the idea. Let me make sure I just have this set here. Logging analytics 2. Let's just unbind my first one. Okay. And then let's refresh that. Let's go jump over to queue, and we'll go to default.analytics. We're going to purge these messages, and it's just going to jump back to 0, and let's go ahead and send it again just to make sure that we covered all our stuff. And let's give it, okay, yeah, there it is. So we just verified it works. Again, I just want to show you how to set this up on video just to document it somewhere. But that's really it. So once you get comfortable with like using RabbitMQ's management UI, you can make some seriously powerful stuff. Especially, I want to make a video getting into topic exchanges, but I mean you can get very, very intricate in terms of how you route based on wildcards, single words, the whole word. I mean you can get really technical. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this is somewhat at least a maybe unique approach to how you could go about leveraging specific queues, potentially in an analytics way if you want to have a consumer consume those off of and only perform some kind of analytics based on a particular condition that you would set before. So hopefully this was helpful. Yeah, I'll see you in the next one.